The moment that changed everything didn't happen on the field, it happened live on air. A Browns insider went on a Cleveland sports show and dropped a statement that instantly sent shockwaves through the NFL conversation. According to him, the Cleveland Browns might be looking for anybody but Shedeur Sanders to lead their offense. Not a mild critique, not a cautious evaluation. A flat-out claim that the organization would rather trust a long list of other quarterbacks before handing Sanders the keys. Within minutes, fans exploded online. Was this insider revealing the Browns' real plans or pushing a narrative that never should have been said out loud? Because Sanders isn't just another rookie quarterback fighting for a job. He's one of the most talked-about young players in football, carrying huge expectations and an even bigger spotlight. And when a story like this hits the media, it doesn't just question a player's performance, it can shape his entire future. But here, where things get even more interesting, because the backlash that followed exposed something far bigger than one controversial comment. What started as a routine discussion about quarterback competition quickly turned into one of the most controversial talking points surrounding the Cleveland Browns this offseason. During a live broadcast on a Cleveland sports show, a Browns insider didn't just analyze the team's quarterback situation. He delivered a statement that immediately caught fans off guard. According to the insider, the debate about whether Shedeur Sanders should be the Browns' future quarterback was basically over, but not in the way many fans expected. Instead of framing Sanders as the team's rising star, the insider suggested something very different, that the Browns could be willing to explore just about any other option before fully committing to him. The comment quickly escalated when several alternative quarterbacks were mentioned as possible solutions. Names like Deshaun Watson, Anthony Richardson, Malik Willis, and even Ty Simpson were brought into the conversation as players who might fit what the Browns are trying to build. To some listeners, it sounded like ordinary football debate. Teams discuss quarterback options all the time, especially when trying to stabilize the most important position in the sport. But to others, the tone of the conversation felt very different. The way Sanders was described struck many fans as dismissive rather than analytical, almost as if the idea of him leading the franchise was being brushed aside entirely. And that's where the controversy truly began. Because Sanders isn't just another quarterback competing for a roster spot. His name already carries enormous attention across the football world. Being the son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders means every move he makes is watched closely, analyzed heavily, and debated nonstop. Fair or not, that spotlight has followed him since his college days. So when a local insider publicly suggested that the Browns might prefer other quarterbacks, fans immediately interpreted it as something bigger than simple analysis. On social media, the clip spread rapidly. Supporters of Sanders argued the comment sounded less like objective evaluation and more like an attempt to shape public perception around the young quarterback. Others, however, defended the insider's right to question Sanders' readiness. After all, the NFL is a results-driven league, and quarterback competition is often brutal. In their view, discussing alternative options wasn't disrespect, it was simply realistic. But regardless of which side people landed on, one thing became clear almost instantly. The conversation about Sanders had officially moved beyond normal football talk. It had turned into a narrative battle. And once narratives start forming in the NFL, they tend to grow much bigger than the original comment that started them. But what happened next took the story in a direction almost nobody expected. Long before the controversy started swirling around Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders was already one of the most talked about young quarterbacks in football. And the reason goes far beyond his stats or highlight throws. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, Sanders carried a level of attention that most rookies never experience. Part of that attention comes from his last name. Being the son of NFL legend Deion Sanders meant that expectations followed him long before he ever reached the league. Fans expected confidence, leadership, and star-level performance from day one. But the NFL rarely works that way, especially for young quarterbacks entering unstable situations. When the Cleveland Browns brought Sanders into the organization, many supporters believed the franchise had finally found its long-term answer at quarterback. Cleveland has spent years searching for stability at the position, cycling through starters and rebuilding plans more times than fans can count. So naturally, when a talented and confident young quarterback arrived, hope quickly followed. But hope in the NFL often comes with pressure. Unlike veteran quarterbacks who are given time to adjust quietly, Sanders stepped into a situation where every throw, every decision, and every mistake was instantly analyzed. Analysts debated his mechanics, commentators questioned his readiness, and on social media, every game turned into a heated argument about whether he was truly ready to lead an NFL franchise. Still, many observers believe Sanders showed flashes of the qualities that made him such a highly discussed prospect. His confidence in the pocket, his willingness to stand in against pressure, and his ability to deliver accurate throws under difficult conditions impressed several evaluators who watched his early performances closely. That's exactly why some analysts were surprised when the recent insider comments suggested the Browns might be looking elsewhere for answers. To them, Sanders represents potential, the kind of raw talent that teams usually try to develop rather than move away from quickly. At the same time, critics argue that potential alone isn't enough in a league where results matter immediately. They point to moments of inconsistency and say the Browns cannot afford to gamble on development if they want to compete right now. This difference in perspective is what has turned the Sanders conversation into such a heated debate. For supporters, the young quarterback deserves patience and support as he adjusts to the professional level. For skeptics, the Browns should explore every possible option before committing to a long-term plan. And that clash of opinions has created the perfect environment for controversy. Because once fans started hearing insiders question Sanders' future, the discussion quickly moved beyond performance. It became about belief, whether the organization truly believes in him. But just when the criticism began gaining momentum, one of the most respected voices in football decided to step into the conversation, and what he said changed the entire tone of the debate. Just as the criticism around Shedeur Sanders began gaining momentum, one of the most recognizable voices in football scouting decided to step into the conversation, and he didn't hold back. During a national television appearance, longtime NFL draft analyst Mel Kiper Jr. directly addressed the growing negativity surrounding the young quarterback. Instead of echoing the doubts circulating in Cleveland media circles, Kiper pushed back hard against the idea that Sanders had somehow failed to prove himself. Kiper made it clear that many critics were ignoring the context of Sanders' early games. According to him, evaluating a young quarterback without considering the chaos around him was not only unfair, it was misleading. He pointed to several factors that complicated Sanders' rookie experience with the Cleveland Browns. The offensive line struggled with injuries, receivers dropped key passes, the offense lacked consistency, and several games were played under brutal weather conditions that make quarterback play far more difficult. Despite all of that, Sanders still showed flashes of the accuracy and poise that made him such a highly discussed prospect. Kiper even questioned what more people expected from a rookie quarterback thrown into that kind of environment. From his perspective, Sanders wasn't collapsing under pressure, he was surviving it. And that distinction matters. Because in the NFL, the early years of a quarterback's career are often messy. Even elite quarterbacks struggle when the system around them isn't functioning properly. Kiper's argument was simple. Judging Sanders too quickly could be a massive mistake. His comments quickly gained traction across football media. For many fans who already supported Sanders, Hearing such a respected analyst defend him felt like validation. It reinforced the belief that the criticism coming from certain insiders might be exaggerated or driven by narrative rather than pure football evaluation. But the reaction wasn't unanimous. Some analysts pushed back against Kiper's defense, arguing that while context matters, the Browns still have to evaluate results. Quarterback development is important, but so is winning games. And if the organization believes competition could improve the position, they're likely to explore every possible option. Still, Kiper's words shifted the tone of the debate. Instead of the conversation being dominated by doubts about Sanders, people began asking a different question: whether the criticism itself had gone too far. And once that question entered the conversation, the entire story surrounding Sanders started to look very different. Because behind the scenes, the Browns themselves were sending signals that didn't exactly match the negative narrative circulating online. And those signals hinted at a strategy that many fans might be misunderstanding completely. The controversy surrounding Shedeur Sanders didn't explode because of one bad game or a single statistic. It ignited because of something said live on air, a moment that instantly changed the tone of the entire discussion around the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation. During a Cleveland sports broadcast, a Browns insider made a series of remarks that quickly caught the attention of fans. Instead of framing the quarterback battle as a normal training camp competition, the insider suggested that the organization might actually be searching for alternatives rather than committing to Sanders. At one point, the conversation shifted toward the possibility of bringing in other quarterbacks who could potentially compete for the starting job. Names like Anthony Richardson were mentioned as intriguing options due to their physical upside, while others speculated about players such as Malik Willis entering the mix if the Browns wanted to take another swing at the position. The tone of the segment is what made it go viral. Rather than presenting Sanders as a developing quarterback who could grow into the role, the comments gave some listeners the impression that the team might prefer almost anyone else leading the offense. For fans who had been rooting for Sanders to become the long-term solution, that statement landed like a bomb. Within hours, clips from the show began spreading across social media. Fans debated what the insider truly meant. Some believed the comments were being taken out of context, that the insider was simply discussing potential roster strategies the Browns could explore. Others weren't convinced. Supporters of Sanders argued the phrasing sounded dismissive, almost as if the young quarterback had already been written off. They questioned why a rookie who had barely begun his career was being discussed, as if the team had already lost faith in him. And because Sanders already carries enormous attention due to his background and expectations, the reaction only grew louder. Many fans pointed out that quarterback competition is common in the NFL. Teams frequently bring in multiple options during the offseason to evaluate who performs best in training camp. From that perspective, the Browns exploring other possibilities wouldn't necessarily mean they had given up on Sanders. But the way the comments were delivered fueled a very different interpretation. Instead of sounding like normal football analysis, the discussion began to feel like a narrative forming, one where Sanders was being portrayed as a problem rather than a young quarterback still developing. And once that narrative started spreading online, it became impossible to contain. Because in today's NFL media environment, a single comment can reshape public perception overnight. What might have been intended as a routine opinion suddenly turned into a national debate about whether the Browns truly believed in their quarterback. But just when the situation seemed to be spiraling into a full-blown controversy, another piece of the puzzle started to emerge, one that suggested the Browns might not see the situation the way many insiders were describing it. As the debate around Shedeur Sanders continued to grow louder, the Cleveland Browns themselves began sending a message that complicated the entire narrative. While media discussions were framing the situation as a potential rejection of Sanders, the organization appeared to be emphasizing something much more common in the NFL: open competition. Inside the Browns building, the quarterback situation has reportedly been treated as exactly that: a competition. Veterans and young players alike are expected to battle for the starting role during training camp and off-season practices. That approach isn't unusual. In fact, many teams use competition intentionally to push players to improve and reveal who performs best under pressure. Part of the confusion comes from the presence of experienced quarterbacks already on the roster, particularly Deshaun Watson. Watson's career has been filled with ups and downs in recent seasons, but he still carries the resume of a veteran who has played at a high level before. For a team searching for stability, allowing both Watson and Sanders to compete could simply be the Browns' way of ensuring they get the strongest possible performance from the position. Still, the outside perception has been very different. Because when fans hear that multiple quarterbacks are being evaluated, some interpret that as a lack of faith in Sanders. The assumption quickly becomes that the Browns are hesitant to commit to him as their long-term solution. Once that idea begins circulating online, it tends to grow rapidly, especially when media voices start amplifying the possibility. But internally, the Browns' leadership has not publicly suggested that Sanders is out of the picture. In fact, General Manager Andrew Berry has previously spoken about the importance of developing young quarterbacks and giving them the opportunity to grow within the system. That's a crucial detail, often lost in the noise of media debates. Developing quarterbacks in the NFL rarely happens in a straight line. Many players struggle early, face criticism, and then gradually improve as they gain experience. For teams, creating competition doesn't always mean replacing a player. Sometimes it simply means pushing them to reach their full potential. And that possibility is exactly why the Browns' approach might be more strategic than it appears from the outside. Instead of abandoning Sanders, the team could be trying to build an environment where he either proves himself as the clear starter or benefits from the experience of competing against veteran quarterbacks. But the problem with that strategy is perception. Because while the Browns may view the situation as normal roster management, the media narrative surrounding Sanders has already taken on a life of its own. And once fans start choosing sides in a debate like this, the conversation quickly becomes far bigger than the actual football decisions being made. Which leads to the most unpredictable element of the entire situation: the reaction from Browns fans themselves. As the debate around Shedeur Sanders continued to spread across sports media, the loudest reactions didn't come from analysts or insiders. They came from the fans. And within the community of Cleveland Browns supporters, the conversation quickly turned into a full-blown divide. On one side are fans who believe Sanders deserves time, patience, and a fair opportunity to grow into the role. To them, the constant criticism feels premature. They point out that many young quarterbacks struggle early in their careers, especially when the team around them isn't operating smoothly. From their perspective, writing off a developing player after a limited number of games makes little sense. Supporters also argue that the Browns themselves invested in Sanders for a reason. Teams don't draft quarterbacks unless they believe those players have the potential to lead the franchise one day. Because of that, some fans believe the negative narrative forming around Sanders is being exaggerated by media discussions rather than by the team's actual plans. But not everyone sees it that way. Another group of fans believes the Browns simply can't afford to wait for development if the team wants to compete immediately. In their eyes, the NFL is a results-driven league where performance matters more than potential. If another quarterback gives Cleveland a better chance to win games right now, they argue the team should seriously consider that option. This difference in opinion has turned online fan spaces into heated battlegrounds. Threads on football forums, fan pages, and discussion boards have filled with debates about Sanders' future. Some posts defend his talent and leadership qualities, while others question whether he has shown enough to secure the starting role. What makes the situation even more intense is the attention surrounding Sanders himself. Because of his connection to Deion Sanders, every discussion about his performance attracts a wider audience than most young quarterbacks receive. That spotlight magnifies both praise and criticism, making the conversation feel much bigger than a typical quarterback competition. In many ways, the Browns fan base isn't just debating football anymore. They're debating belief. Belief in Sanders' potential, belief in the organization's long-term plan, and belief in whether the team should prioritize immediate success or future development. And when those kinds of beliefs clash, emotions run high. But while fans continue arguing about what the Browns should do, the most important voice in this entire story has remained relatively quiet: Sanders himself. Because at the end of the day, no insider comment, analyst opinion, or online debate will decide his future. Only one thing can truly settle the argument: what happens on the field. While the debate continues across sports media and fan communities, the reality for Shedeur Sanders is far simpler and far more intense. In the NFL, narratives can form overnight, but they can also disappear just as quickly. And the one thing that erases criticism faster than anything else is performance. Right now, Sanders finds himself standing at one of the most important moments of his young career with the Cleveland Browns. The noise surrounding him is louder than ever. Analysts are debating his potential, insiders are questioning the team's confidence in him, and fans remain divided about whether he should be the franchise's long-term quarterback. But inside the locker room, the situation likely feels very different. Quarterback competitions happen across the league every year. Veterans battle rookies, young players compete with experienced starters, and coaching staffs evaluate who gives the team the best chance to win. In many ways, Sanders is simply experiencing a challenge that countless quarterbacks before him have faced. Even players like Deshaun Watson had to prove themselves early in their careers before becoming established starters. The difference for Sanders is the spotlight. Because of the attention surrounding him, from media discussions to fan debates, every step of his development is being watched more closely than usual. And that pressure can either break a young quarterback or sharpen them. For Sanders, the upcoming season represents an opportunity to rewrite the entire narrative. If he steps onto the field and delivers consistent performances, many of the doubts circulating today could fade quickly. Critics who question his readiness might suddenly shift their tone. Analysts who remain skeptical could start acknowledging his progress. That's how quickly NFL narratives change. But the opposite possibility also exists. If Sanders struggles to secure the starting role or fails to capitalize on his opportunities, the current skepticism could grow even louder. Media discussions would likely intensify, and the conversation about Cleveland's quarterback future would take another unpredictable turn. That's the reality of playing the most scrutinized position in professional sports. And yet, for all the speculation surrounding the Browns' quarterback situation, one truth remains clear: the organization still needs stability at the position. Whether that stability ultimately comes from Sanders, from another quarterback on the roster, or from a future move the team might make remains uncertain. What is certain, however, is that this controversy has already turned Sanders into one of the most talked about young players in football. And as the next chapter of his career unfolds, the entire league will be watching to see whether this debate becomes just another forgotten storyline or the beginning of something much bigger. In the NFL, talent alone doesn't shape a player's legacy. Narratives do. And right now, few young quarterbacks are caught in a louder storyline than Shedeur Sanders with the Cleveland Browns. What started as one insider's controversial comment has grown into a full-blown debate stretching across sports media, fan communities, and analyst panels. Some believe the criticism surrounding Sanders reflects real concerns about his readiness. Others argue the narrative has been blown far out of proportion, a combination of speculation, hot takes, and the enormous spotlight that follows his name. And that spotlight isn't going anywhere. Because Sanders represents more than just another young quarterback trying to find his place in the league. With expectations tied to his talent, his confidence, and the legacy of Deion Sanders, every development in his career instantly becomes a headline. Every throw gets analyzed. Every rumor gets amplified. But here's the reality that often gets lost in all the noise. The Browns are still searching for stability at quarterback. For years, Cleveland has cycled through different solutions, hoping to finally find the player who can anchor the franchise long-term. Whether Sanders ultimately becomes that player remains uncertain, but the opportunity is still very much in front of him. And opportunities like this define careers. If Sanders steps into the upcoming season and delivers strong performances, the current criticism could quickly turn into praise. The same analysts questioning him today might soon be talking about his growth, resilience, and leadership. NFL narratives have a way of flipping overnight when results begin to match potential. But if things don't go smoothly, the skepticism that already surrounds him will only grow louder. The quarterback conversation in Cleveland would continue, and the pressure on Sanders would intensify even further. That's why this moment feels so pivotal. Right now, the debate around Sanders isn't just about football mechanics or statistics. It's about belief in his potential, belief in the Browns' plan, and belief in whether he can rise above the noise surrounding him. And in a league where perception can shape reality, the next chapter of Sanders' story may determine whether this controversy becomes a forgotten offseason debate or the beginning of one of the most compelling quarterback stories in the NFL. Because one thing is certain, the story of Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland is far from finished.